Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willy Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. And good evening once again, and welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willy Hassell, your very sick gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable, and always the sunshine behind the microphone. She is the lovely. She is the mystical. She is running from the telephone. There she is. She is the mysterious Lynn Nickerson.
I had to run a mile to get here.
She was chatting on the phone with our guest.
Good evening, Willie. How are you doing? Did you have a good day today?
I did have a good day today, yes.
In spite of the fact that you are quite under the weather.
Under the weather, yes. And my job for the next hour is to try not to have any coughing fits on the radio.
I don't want you passing out because I can't run the board.
I know. That's the only reason you really brought me with you tonight.
Yep, I need you.
Yeah. Well, it's always nice to be needed, no matter what the reason might be.
But we did have a wonderful time today. We went to
went to
kind of like a little expo, a little conference. It was True Ghost conference, and two of our guests, a future guest and a past guest and a future guest again, they spoke today, and it was a fascinating conference.
It was.
We enjoyed it.
Yes, it was True Ghost 2014, and we thank Shane Sawa for inviting us.
Great presentation.
Yes, it was.
Fun time. Okay. So would you like to introduce Reverend Carter?
I would love to introduce Reverend Carter. And so, anyways, tonight's guest is Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. Reverend Carter moved to New York City in 1980, where he spent 27 years working as a professional actor before moving to Asheville, North Carolina with his family. He received his Master's in Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. His book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, was #1 on Amazon's list of UFO-related books in March of 2014. Reverend Carter is a regular consultant on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, as well as being featured in the UFO TV documentary, The Real 4400, and also in many other shows for the History and Sci-Fi channels. And it is a real pleasure to welcome to the show Reverend Carter. Good evening.
Good evening,
Good
Reverend
evening.
Carter.
You know, I'm having, you guys sound really far away.
Well, you know, I usually am out in space, but for some reason...
Okay, let's see what we can do here.
For some reason, a lot of people say that on the phone.
I can barely hear you.
For some reason, a lot of people say that on the phone, but there's nothing I can do about it, except talk a little louder.
Okay. Are you sure, Willie? You can't turn any knobs up?
No. No, I'm all out of knobs.
Okay. Is this any better, Reverend Carter? Is this any better?
It's a little better. I just have to really strain to hear.
Okay, so sorry.
We'll get through it.
Yeah, we'll muddle through.
Okay.
We'll get through it.
Well,
It may be a delay on when I answer some of your questions, though.
okay. We'll give her a moment for it to pause and wait for your response.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show. And personally, I want to thank you, too, for undertaking the task of addressing some of the discrepancies, inconsistencies, and unexplained topics that are found in the Bible, not only to mention that there are similar issues in other holy books.
Yes.
Now, I'm not a theologian, and I don't pretend to know the Bible inside and out, but I'd like to personally present you with some topics first, and then I'll open the floor to you for some comment. So,
Okay.
these are my feelings and my background. Ever since I hit adolescence and started taking Bible classes,
Yeah.
I would read things that just didn't make sense to me, and they were things that were far beyond your typical miracle. There were statements that were made that seemed either vague or illogical, but it was information that we as students of the Bible were expected to accept on blind faith.
Sure.
So most of these things that I sort of had a point of contention with are found in the book of Genesis, but also they are themes that are repeated throughout the Old Testament. And
What? Let me ask you a question very quickly.
Sure.
What denomination were you raised?
it was actually congregational.
Congregationals. Okay.
Okay. So most of these topics you do, as a matter of fact, address in your book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials, and the Holy Bible. So it won't be totally unfamiliar to you. But these are 5 things in particular that really bothered me as a young girl. So the first one was the Elohim and the Nephilim. Who the heck were they? They were never explained. Number 2, why is God from the Old Testament always angry, vengeful, and spiteful, and then he seems to go through an attitude adjustment and he becomes a loving God in the New Testament?
Well, let's do one or two at a time.
Oh, I was just going to present all 3 to. Sure, why don't we do that?
Okay, because you said you had how many questions did you have?
Well, there were 5 ideas that I wanted to present to you.
Yeah, let's do the first 2.
All
I
right.
think the first one you were asking about the Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim and Elohim, according to Zechariah Sitchin's work, means it's plural. So instead of God, singular, it's gods, plural.
Gods.
And so this led, in the book of Genesis, ancient astronaut theorists and other curious people to say that perhaps there were more than one set of beings or deities or entities involved in the creation of human beings. And so when in Genesis the passage reads, "Let us make man in our image," this obviously lends itself to who is the us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people said the us were other angels, which it could have been, because they were angel means messenger, and we'll get into that a little more.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely there were other folks there. Genesis is based on Sumerian cosmology, which, of course, had no problems talking about various gods and goddesses, which we would now recognize as extraterrestrials. The Nephilim there's different names for the Nephilim. Some people call them the Watchers. In Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, the verse reads that the sons of God came down and to the daughters of men. And they made, I don't know how they copulated, maybe with genetic engineering, but the human women had offspring from this encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people say that these Nephilim are the fallen angels.
So they're part human, part extraterrestrial.
Who came down and started a lot of mess, for lack of a better word, with earthlings. Now, there's many interpretations of this. To go deeper into this, I suggest that one pick up the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch goes into great detail about these beings called the Watchers. There were 200 of them. And they named Enoch, they gave him his name Enoch. He was called the scribe of the gods. And Enoch even talks, he had names for some of these, I call them off-world intelligences or extraterrestrials. And they came down to Earth, and they taught us things like astronomy, astrology, how to make dyes and to dye certain clothes. They told us about gems and gemstones. They taught about how to use offensive and defensive weapons. I don't particularly think those things are negative, but a lot of people say, well, they are. They taught us how to hurt one another.
Well, it's self-defense, too.
But I hope that kind of gives you an answer to those two questions. Again, if you want to get more detail, if you purchase the Book of Enoch, it goes into great detail. And again, Elohim is plural, which means more than one.
More than one God.
God.
Well, let me ask you about
I hope that kind of, and Zechariah Sitchin's work really goes into great detail.
Yep, fabulous.
And, he's a Sumerian scholar. He's a secular Jewish man. I actually met him for lunch once in New York.
You were fortunate.
A few blocks from me. So there are ways you can research more.
Well, Enoch, then, he was in the ancient past, right, before biblical times?
Enoch was a book that was taken, that did not make it into the canon. And it's suspected that one of the reasons he didn't make it into the canon is because of the subject matter. And again, he talks about various gods and goddesses, various angels. And so this book was not chosen to be put into the Christian canon. It was in the Jewish tradition very early on, and the Book of Enoch is also held in high esteem in Abyssinia, in Ethiopia, which is where it was rediscovered, and it is part of their tradition.
Okay, if you could hold it just right there. We've got one underwriter announcement here.
Sure.
Program on Portsmouth Community Radio is made possible by you, our members, and by our underwriters, which include Living Innovations, the Music Hall, the New Hampshire Gazette, and Daystar Computer Services. All right. So back to Enoch. I wanted to ask you really quick then, Reverend Carter, to what period does he go back to? Is this ancient times, like maybe 6000 BC, or have they dated it?
It predates. I cannot give you a date, but it definitely predates the canon as we know it.
Okay, so it basically, if it were to...
Again, actually, it was not. It was whoever did the choosing about the Book of Enoch, which is probably around the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Some books were allowed to stay in, some books were taken out.
Right.
And Enoch was one of those books.
Would it have appeared in the Old Testament?
Tradition, it was held in high esteem for a while, as well as early Christianity in Ethiopia.
But would it have appeared in the Old Testament or the New Testament if they kept it?
Oh, it's very, very much. It would be in the First Testament, the Old Testament.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right, then why don't we go to God of the Old Testament that was very angry, spiteful, and vengeful? Why is that?
Yeah. Well, from my research, and I'm surely not the only one, and this is more of a theological question that gets people kind of nervous, but it's a good question. I say that Yahweh is an astronaut for precisely the same reasons that you're talking about. He's very vengeful. He has a temper issue, and at that time, I'm thinking that there were other off-world intelligences who were probably carving up that area of the Middle East, Palestine, Egypt, those parts geographically of the globe. And so here we have an entity who is over-concerned with sexuality. All the men have to be circumcised. They're not to mate with other tribes. He says, I am a jealous God. One has to wonder why an omniscient, omnipresent deity would be jealous of anything.
Yeah.
And so for those reasons, I say that Yahweh is an astronaut. There is a passage in the Hebrew translation of the book of Ezekiel, chapter 4. I will read it to you, verse 12. He's telling Ezekiel to eat excrement.
Ooh.
And he says to Ezekiel, eat it as a barley cake. You shall bake it on human excrement before their eyes. So said the Lord, shall the people of Israel eat their bread, unclean among the nations to which I will banish them. Then I said, I being Ezekiel, Ah, Lord God, my person was never defiled, nor have I eaten anything that died of itself, or was torn by beasts from my mouth until now, nor has foul flesh entered my mouth. In other words, but I kept kosher.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord answers, see, I allow you cow's dung instead of human excrement. Prepare your bread on that. I mean, what a guy. Okay, you don't have to eat human excrement. You can eat cow excrement. And in the King James Version, it's translated as dung. But this does not seem like the type of deity that one wants to worship, if that's for lack of a better word, that would have a human being eat excrement. There are other passages in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 13, verse 14. I will smash them one against the other, parents and children alike, declares the Lord. No pity, compassion, or mercy will stop me from destroying them. Now, to be fair to Yahweh, there are times where Yahweh and the Lord are used interchangeably in the First Testament, in the Old Testament, and sometimes not. And so we don't know if Yahweh is the same as the Lord, or they're different entities. The Lord may be a commander of a ship, as may be Yahweh. But the point is that when you're killing men, women, and children, to prove a point,
It's not a divine thing.
when you're killing the firstborn, the Exodus story, one has to wonder, just who is this being? Is this a God of love and compassion, a God of intelligence, or is this another being who has a lot of foibles?
Well, let me ask you this then. This is contingent on what you just said. Zechariah Sitchin refers to the Anunnaki that came here. Now,
Yes.
which he kind of intimates that it's the Elohim. So do you think that there were various planets that contacted us, so that there were a variety of different gods?
Yes,
or
yes,
you
indeed.
do?
There were various races. There were various
Okay.
races who still visit us. But there were definitely various races. And so when Yahweh says, you shall have no other gods before me, I know in contemporary times we're talking about the gods of avarice and greed, or sex, or alcohol, or whatever. That's a way of looking at it. But I believe that he was saying, there are other beings, but I am your tribe. I chose you. You belong to me. So I'm thinking there were other tribes. I'm sorry, other star visitors visiting the Earth at that time.
Okay, do you have any idea what other races there may have been, other than the Anunnaki from Nibiru?
Well, I mean, we can look at the races that we have now, and I think one has to be careful with names. You mentioned the Nephilim, and Enoch, they're called the Watchers. So names can get very confusing. But I would imagine, I mean, I have Cherokee ancestry in me. We talk about the Palladians. Now, the Palladians are blonde, blue-eyed, Nordic-looking people. Yet the Native Americans are folk of color, more reddish-brown, more red in color. But we say we have a Palladian ancestry. So I'm assuming that some of the races that are visiting us now, the Nordics, the tall whites, the various species of grays, the reptilians, I'm sure that they were visiting Earth in those times with our ancestors as well as now. But it's all speculation.
Yeah.
But what we can be sure of is that we were visited.
Yeah. But that really does answer some questions. I don't think people have thought about that far back, that we were contacted by various races. Sitchin usually talks about the Anunnaki, but he doesn't leave much room for other races. So this really gives it another dimension.
The thing is this: no one has all the answers.
No.
We all. It's like a puzzle, and we all bring pieces of the puzzle. But none of us were there, not unless we can remember our past lives, so we don't know. Sometimes the questions are more important than the answers.
I agree with you. Also, too, there's a problem with translation because the words aren't always interpreted correctly, and the same thing may be called by different words. Even if it were translated incorrectly, using the same word, you could eventually figure out what was meant, but they'll use several different words for the same thing, and it winds up being very confusing.
It can be, but the point is you don't want to get into the paralysis of analysis, because the issue is this, at least in my mind, we are being visited by other off-world intelligences.
Mm-hmm.
They have been coming here for millennia. That is the crux of the matter. And how do we, as people on planet Earth, how do we react with one another or act, from a spiritual point of view? I mean, let's say you find out every race that was here. Let's say you get all the answers to your questions. And it's good to have questions. My thing is, so what? Now you still have to get up and go to work tomorrow. You still have to, if you have children, you still have to raise your children. The point is, where does your spiritual growth, how are you going to live now, knowing that we have contact with off-world intelligences and that there are other living sentient beings in the universe who are technologically advanced, some more spiritually advanced? To me, that's the question. We can always talk about it, and I want to be clear with this. I've just come to this in the past several months. The thing is that we have information, but information is not wisdom. Information is just what it is. It's information. So what I say is, it's fine. Don't get stuck on that. Whether they're Anunnaki, whether they're the Watchers, that's fine. The point is how are you going to live your life now? How are you going to contribute now spiritually? Because that's what a lot of these beings are about. I have to be honest. I'm not one of those people who thinks that all of them come here wanting to sing Kumbaya with us. and some of them, most of them are more technologically advanced than we are. But we can get so caught up in the technology that we see what happens with technology. Technology is the new God. And granted, I'm a biased person. I happen to be a clergy person. So I'm not so much interested in whether they use propulsion systems or whatever. Since my contacts, it's my spiritual evolution that has been my main focus. And how will that change the way we interact with one another? If you wake up tomorrow with all the answers to your questions, you still have to live your life here on planet Earth. Hopefully you will want to live a life of authenticity and integrity and healing and wholeness. Information doesn't give you that.
I still want to know where I came from, and I want to know about the origins of all the races. That's very important to me. For some reason, I don't really know why. The second thing is there are some good ones and some bad ones out there, and I think we've been contacted by both of them. And then from there, I think we can get into the spiritual questions. Well, is there a God? Or if there is a God, who the heck is it? Because these people were acting as gods when they came here.
Well, that's not so much a spiritual question, at least in my mind. That's a theological question. The spiritual question is, where do you get your source from, which is within. So, and again, I want to be clear. I'm not telling you not to. I mean, that's where you are. But I'm just saying that we can all get caught up in the paralysis of analysis. I don't know if you're going to know all the races. I mean, there are probably about at least 200 or so races in our galaxy alone.
Mm-hmm.
So
there are a lot.
If you're going to, that's a lifetime right there. Mm-hmm. I've had contact with 3 of them. 3
different races?
I guess they say it's whatever floats your boat. I just know that in a world that is consumed with information, we've confused information with wisdom. And I think that if we don't get a kind of a spiritual grasp on how we interact with each other, there'll be nobody around to give the information to, because we'll destroy each other.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be the last big question, I think. Are we ever going to get along with each other? Well, let me go back to question number 3 about the giants, that in those days the giants did walk the earth. And who were the giants? And They have found, archaeologists have found many human giant bones, and they get them shipped to the Smithsonian Institute, and then they're never seen again or heard about again.
Yes.
So,
well, there are reasons for that, and I think some of those are fairly obvious. But yes, there were giants on the earth in those days. It's talked about in Genesis. It's talked about Goliath was definitely a giant, and they may have been the offspring of the
Elohim,
the mating in Genesis 6, and also in the book of Enoch. So I'm certain to a degree that those were the offspring. I mean, when Joshua sends scouts into the land and to Canaan, and scouts come back and say, there are giants in the land. They make us look like grasshoppers. They're probably the offspring of that. Now, the reason, I think it's pretty obvious why you don't hear about these things is because history books would have to be rewritten. There's a lot of money, energy, and time. In history, you have tenured professors who have made livings off of certain theories. People have gotten grants and monies and what have you. And now evidence comes, and it may say that everything you worked on your whole life, the story of history or herstory as we know it, will now have to be altered. Well, people in power don't like change.
Or losing control.
It's pretty obvious why, at least in my mind, why this stuff is being suppressed.
Okay.
There's a lot of at stake. It's the same thing with our government and free energy. Here you have beings that can either come from other dimensions or come from other places in the solar system, and they use energy in a lot of different ways. They don't use the fossil fuels or oil and what have you. And all of this is being suppressed.
Right.
There's a lot of money involved.
Yep, there wouldn't be any money in that.
You come up with something on free energy, and you
Nobody
probably
wants
won't get
it.
the welcome that one would expect.
Yeah.
You see, same thing with medicines. I'm sure some of these healings that are done by some of these off-world intelligences, I've had a healing experience with a blood clot, and I'm telling you, what happens if there's a cure for cancer, which there probably is.
There has been, yes.
Or any of this stuff.
It's been suppressed.
Governments are not going to beat a path to your doorstep unless it's to lock you up or something. You're taking the money out of people's pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot at stake here. Again, I'm not being apologetic for the powers that be, but I'm saying you can probably see why.
Sure.
The Cancer Foundation, once you get a cure, then those millions of dollars that are raised every year are gone.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're at the bottom of the hour, Reverend Carter. We're going to have to take a break here. And hang on, if you would. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, on WSCA-LP 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we will be right back after this short break.
The video portion of Spirit Radio, The Paranormal Experience, is sponsored by Spirit Chasers Paranormal, a paranormal investigation and research organization in Northampton, New Hampshire. Professional, respectful, courteous. Check us out at spiritchasersparanormal.com or email Willy at spiritchasersparanormal.com.
Okay, well, welcome back to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth's West End. And yes, I am still here. I'm just sitting quietly, trying not to cough my head off on the show. But from the community calendar, from the City of Portsmouth Community Newsletter, the Senior Activity Center and Senior Services Office is located at the Portsmouth campus at 100 Campus Drive in Portsmouth. Seniors can watch TV, play games, participate in fitness classes, and socialize. Free coffee and tea will be available. More information is available by contacting Bryn at 603-610-4433 at bchute, that's BCHUTE, at cityofportsmouth.com. The Senior Activity Center is seeking volunteers to greet visitors and welcome people to the center. Volunteers are also needed to perform classes, lectures, and lunchtime talks. 603-610-4433. And how about some upcoming guests to the big broadcast?
Okay, I've got some future guests here. September 27th, we're expecting William J. Hall, who is author of The World's Most Haunted House, which is the true story of a poltergeist haunting on Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And we got a little preview of this today at the conference. Very interesting. October 4th is going to be our first anniversary for 1 year on the air. And joining us to celebrate is our very good friend Sal Nicosia, who is owner and operator of the very haunted Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York. October 11th, that'll be a fundraising show. The first part of the show we will host Jonathan Faust, who is from UK's newest internet paranormal magazine titled Supernatural Magazine, and during the second half of the hour, in studio will be members of the Spirit Chasers Paranormal Investigative Team from Northampton, New Hampshire. October 18th, from Sedona, Arizona, will be Caroline Bodnovitz Genovese, and it'll be her third time back, and she'll be talking about her Wiccan belief system and her personal psychic and paranormal experiences. And on October 25th, Spirit Radio's special interactive Halloween show.
Halloween.
Yay!
I love Halloween.
And so if you'd like to call in with your own paranormal experiences, we'd welcome that on 603-430-9722. And then last but not least, on November 1st, from Ecto Web Paranormal, Karen Mossy and Michael Sullivan, who are EVP specialists, will be joining us. And that's about it for upcoming guests.
That's about it. That sounds like a pretty good list to me.
And a great lineup.
A great lineup. Okay, shall we go back to our guest for tonight, Reverend Michael Carter.
Welcome back, Reverend Carter.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was having trouble hearing you, but thank you for having me.
Okay, can you hear us now? Is that a little bit better?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me see where we took off here. Misplaced my notes. Okay, we finished talking about giants. Well, then, my next issue was with the people in Noah's time they lived to be hundreds of years old. So it makes you wonder what happened. Why did life expectancy decrease? Because you would think that with our present day technology, that the opposite would be true, that, life would get extended instead of decreased. So what do you think about that? What do you think happened? Why do you think we were, I don't know, dumbed down or?
Yeah, I think that we were tampered with.
Yeah.
But I think there were many reasons for that. One of those reasons, when you look at the King's List of Egyptian, in Egyptian cosmology, when they have people living through various dynasties, obviously they were either gods, and by that I mean extraterrestrial, or had the offspring, had that lineage, had that bloodline in them. And I think that was one of the things that some of these extraterrestrial races were vigilant about, because as you see, with the knowledge that we have, I know some people who were very upset that we were dumbed down, if you will, and perhaps, I'm sure there was some tampering, some genetic engineering. I think we can be pretty safe in assuming that. But again, look what we do when we do get technology.
Yeah, we misuse it.
Look what we do. We make weapons.
We go into warfare. Yep.
We hoard from one another. We covet one another. We have this illusion of separateness and scarcity. And I'm not one of those people that subscribe, well, this is solely because of what was done to us. To me, that reeks of a lot of victim mentality. And again, what ETs regressed? What ETs tampered? I'm sure a lot of them had their hands in our in our genetics. So the question becomes: yes, were we tampered with? Almost certainly. To what degree? Who knows? But I do know that, and this is again when I go back to the spiritual evolution of the planet, which my new book talks about in some great length, is that, but there are clues to where we can learn to grow spiritually if we just take the time to do that. But a lot of us, not all, but a lot of us, we live lives of fear. We live lives of, well, if they get more, I get less. There's not enough love to go around, not enough oil to go around, not enough food and water to go around, not enough codependence to go around. We live these lives of separateness. And so it causes us to actually believe these illusions, and then we try to fight one another. It's very disturbing.
It is. It is. Well, let me move on to the fact that you had been visited by ETs. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And you did say you encountered 3 different entities, and I'd kind of like to know your take on their reason for contacting you.
Okay, there were 3 different races. The first contact I had contacts as a child, but in a very different way. I used to see these energy beings and balls of light and all around me all the time, but I thought everybody did. And I could see things. I could see auras around people. I was very intuitive. But I didn't know. I didn't have the vocabulary or the nomenclature to talk about those things. So on December 28th, coming back from a trip to the pyramids at Chichen Itza in Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula, came home, went to a party that evening. I kind of didn't want to go, but I wanted to go. Wanted to show off my tan. I had been out in the sun. It was 85 degrees, 90 degrees. It was freezing in New York. So I went to the party, stayed about an hour and a half. No adult beverages for me, just had maybe some deviled eggs or something, and I left. I got back on the subway at Times Square, and I went back to the Upper West Side to where I live. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I don't know whether it was to go to the bathroom or not. I don't remember even getting out of the bed, and there was a being on the edge of my bed, and my whole room was lit up like Times Square, but the being had this cobalt blue light around. It was like a lap. I can't even describe it, but it was a cobalt blue light. And I think it was a he. He was chalk colored. He was not gray, even though he looked like what we would call a gray. But there are many different races of grays. So many different species of grays, I should say. And so it had on this aluminum foil tight-fitting jumpsuit. I did not even register an insignia or anything. It had the pear-shaped head with the deep wraparound kind of eyes, and it looked at me, and I looked at it, and I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest, and so I pulled the covers up over my head, hoping it would go away.
You were a grown man,
when
right?
I did that. I know, not very macho of me, but that's exactly what I did. And so I heard this whoosh, whoosh, this whooshing sound, and for a few seconds, I thought I was outside because I was freezing. I was freezing. But when I pulled the covers down, I was in my room. And so this went on for about 6-8 months, almost a year. Every full and new moon they would come. They would paralyze me. And then during this time, of course, I went to a psychiatrist because I feared for my sanity. And I had been regressed by the late Bud Hopkins and by the late Gene Mundy. So that helped me get a grip on some things. I went to a support group. But then during that time, I started being visited by some reptilians.
Ooh,
Walked right through my wall. I was living on the 15th floor of an apartment building on Manhattan's Upper West Side. One night, just walked right in. They looked like Spider-Man, only they had the pupils in their eyes were like that of a cat. They were vertical, and they were like yellowish, and their skin was very, very rough, like an alligator skin, a greenish gray, and built like they went to a gym or something.
Whoa.
Scared the you-know-what out of me. But they never harmed me. And they would talk to me. They would send me, they wouldn't move their mouths, but they would show me pictures in my head. And there would be a voice in my head. They were communicating with me. And then just very recently, last year, in 2013, I had a couple encounters with, they looked more humanoid. They were very tall, very pasty, kind of white skin, light-colored hair, and they had robes on, like the old Benedictine monks or the Jesuits used to wear back in the day. And some of the little chalk-colored ones used to wear jackets as well. But, with a hooded kind of robe, long robe, that kind of thing. Now, those are three distinct races. But remember, there are hundreds of them. I mean, the universe is teeming with life. And so when I asked them, sometimes they would tell me through telepathy, or sometimes I would go to, I had a very good friend of mine was a very talented psychic. He's since passed on. And he knew nothing about, I'd never told him about this. He picked up on it right away. And he said, it seems you have some kind of outer space connection. So sometimes he would talk to them, and they would tell him what to tell me.
Really?
And he would tell me, man, that they know you from Atlantis. They know you from past lives.
Wow.
And you made an agreement before you came to this life that you were going to get the word out about the message. And so far, the message from me, and I want to be clear here for those people who will be listening, that I understand people have had traumatic experiences with some of these brothers and sisters, and all of them, again, are not here to sing Kumbaya. I have not had that experience. The beings that I have interacted with have been very deeply spiritual beings.
Even the
They've
reptilians.
accelerated my spiritual growth, and they've helped me in many, many ways. And they said that they don't come here to take over the planet. They could have done that. They said they come here because they're trying to take humanity to the next step in human evolution. But we what? We fight too much.
Yeah.
This is not a new message. Jesus, Buddha, all the sages of the ages, this is not a new message. But it's hard for us to get it. And that they said that the most difficult thing they've had to overcome
It is our
is people's
warlike
fear and their warlike tendencies.
All right, could you hold it just a moment there? We've got one more underwriting announcement. All right, thank you.
Programming on Portsmouth Community Radio is brought to you by our members and by Davies Tire, providing professional auto repair and a full line of Nokian tires, with 2 locations to serve you, Islington Street and Banfield Road in Portsmouth. Discounts available online at daviestire.com. Davies Tire keeps you rolling right.
Okay, we're back. So, Reverend Carter, do you suppose that all 3 of those species were trying to get the same message to you?
I think so. I mean, again, I have not had any. Had I gone through painful experiences with them? Yes, if they did certain things to me that were very painful. But if I asked them not to do it, they wouldn't do it. Of course, your question is what? When they used to come and they used to paralyze me, and I was not asleep. I want you to be clear.
Yeah, you were awake.
They would come to me and in solid. They would touch me. And they had stuck a syringe in the top of my crown. And I got to tell you, it was a little painful. And I was disturbed by it. And I talked to a friend of mine who had been a long-time contactee, and he said, why don't you try talking to them, Michael? Be more interactive. And see, you'll get an idea of what they're about if they listen to you or not. And so I did that. I said to them, I was walking around the house talking to myself. But I said, listen, man, that really hurt what you did. Actually, it wasn't the second time it was the crown of my head. It was in the back of my head where, your spinal cord.
Sure, base of your skull.
Where your neck meets the bottom of your skull.
Mm-hmm.
It was there. And it got my attention. It hurt. And so about a week or so later, I had another visit. And what they did was they showed me, in my mind's eye, a syringe.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt this little pinprick at the top of my head. And that was it. And I said, okay, now there's going to be some type of connection because you listened to me.
So they deliberately did it so it was less painful.
And again, this doesn't happen with everybody. It does happen to a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I say that because I know some people say, oh, come on, man, the Greys and the reptilians, man, they're evil, they're this, that, and the other. And I warn people that, we do that with each other. We stereotype each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if something happens to you by one group of people, then they're all like that. Well, we do that with, it's called intergalactic racism. And so what we do is we group a whole bunch of people because of one experience that we've had. So I try to speak out around those issues and to warn people that just like they're benevolent human beings, well, that's the same way with off-world intelligences. Just because someone comes from another dimension or another planet doesn't mean they're more spiritual than you. Just because someone may be dead, but we know consciousness goes on, that doesn't mean that you have to go by what you feel. But you also have to say, am I coming from fear? Is my own fear influencing this experience? Because if it is, which is natural, but then you have to say, okay, what's really going on here?
Were they doing this to help you physically? Was that their goal?
Well, when I had the goal was to assist me with this message, and I'm not talking about some messianic message, just to get about that we need to love, we need to learn to love. Mm-hmm. That is the crux of the message. Now, when I had this blood clot, I was going through a very rough time in my life personally, and I had some death in my family. I had some relationship issues, and it was a very rough year for me. And they helped. I had a blood clot. I was on Coumadin for a while. I was injecting myself with blood thinner, and they came to my home on July 4th of 2013 at 10 minutes to 10 on a rainy evening where all the fireworks and stuff were canceled, and they shot this green ray into my stomach when I turned around and saw them in my room, and the next day my blood clot was gone.
You could feel
and
that it
my
was gone.
leg had gone back to its normal size.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Do you think now people being exposed to the fact that perhaps we were contacted millennia ago, do you think that that's going to change people's idea of God and good and
Well,
bad?
that's what my next book is about. It'll be out October 13th.
Can you give us a
Called
preview?
A New World, If You Can Take It.
A New
God,
World.
Extraterrestrials, and human evolution. Yeah, I think it will. But I think it will cause people to question. And that's, again, questions are important, sometimes more important than answers. But I think once, and I already see it, even though people may use the word God, they're not using it in the way that maybe our parents did, that it was some man up in the sky who was like Santa Claus looking around if you were naughty or nice. People may use that word in very different ways, which means there's an evolution. Now, the Palladians, I do a chapter on the Palladians and their spirituality. They say there are gods, but those gods are extraterrestrial in origin. There is something that they call evolution. That they call creation.
Okay, yeah.
And they say that creation is the energy and intelligence of the all that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I like that idea. And it's not about arms and legs and a beard, or if it's a white male or a man or whatever. There is something called creation. I guess some people would call it the Force if you're a Star Wars fan, or the primal cause if you're a philosopher, or all that is. The name is not important. And they talk about the teachings of Jesus, whom they call Emmanuel, and they say that he came here and he talked about reincarnation, but he talked about gaining knowledge, teaching people, and growing your soul, and that it wasn't so much about information. It was about, can that information lead to knowledge, and that knowledge will lead to wisdom, and that wisdom will lead to love.
All right. Well,
and that resonates with me very deeply. This has also been the spirituality expressed on some level by all extraterrestrials, that there is something more powerful, more intelligent, but they don't look at it the way we look at it, because it's like a child looks at it, that there's a God who's punishing us if we're naughty or nice. That energy is within us. We're not separate from us. But the way churches and synagogues and mosques, they've taught us to look outside ourselves for something that is within us.
Oh.
And I think that's because of some of these ETs were setting themselves up as CEOs and what have you.
Yeah.
Jesus comes along and brings a different message.
Right.
He says, you don't only love those who love you, you love your enemies.
Reverend Carter, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are almost out of time. Would you like to give us your website and the name of your book again?
Okay. My website is michaeljscarter.com. You can type in Michael J.S. Carter, and all my YouTube stuff, everything will come up.
Great.
My first book is called Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. You may get that on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and Nook or Kindle. My new book, which will be out October 13th, is called A New World, If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. You can pre-order it on Kindle now, or you can wait, but on October 13th, the paperback copy will be out on Amazon.
Thank you so much. This has been very interesting. Sorry to cut you short. We have a short hour. So
we thank you very much.
Maybe we can do it again when the new book comes out.
Perhaps we can, yes.
We can talk about that maybe.
Absolutely.
That would be good. But for tonight, we appreciate you joining us. And I only had to run out of the studio once to have a little coughing fit, so I did pretty good.
Thank you for contacting me. Listen, just very quickly.
Yes.
Will you send me a link?
I will.
Yes.
I will, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Blessings to you both.
You too. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Well, that takes care of Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. Another week.
Another week, and thank you all for listening. Good night.
In this one of many possible worlds, all for the best or some bizarre test. It is what it is, and whatever. Time is still the infinite jest. The air